Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Daniel Karp. I was trying to think of when I actually met Daniel first in person. I've known of him for a long time. He's an acting coach at LB Acting Studio. And I think if you've been listening to this from the start, you know LB Acting Studio here in Toronto was my first ever acting studio that I ever went to when I was first starting out on this a crazy adventure. But Daniel's a coach there. You know what? I think we met first in person and we're kind of like, have we ever met before? I feel like we know each other. At the Acting Coaches and Educators Conference that I was presenting at. He was there as I was about to say spectator, but as a participant because he's an acting coach. He's also an actor. He also had a really interesting kind of quote-unquote origin story. He has we have a really interesting conversation about how when he was in high school, he was really good at math, and he was in all those advanced math classes that I was not quite good enough to be in. And it's interesting. He says, some of my best friends to this day are from that acting class, but there was something missing. And he describes it way more eloquently than I am right now. You'll hear it. But there was that sense of something's missing. And I think it's the camaraderie that happens when you are artistically creating something together as a group. And, so there we go. He went into theater school. He did the acting thing and now he does the acting coaching thing and the acting thing. He is absolutely awesome. Please enjoy the incredible Daniel Karp. Story. How did you get into this crazy business of acting, teaching, all the stuff you do?
That's two separate ones. I didn't grow up with any arts in my family, really. I mean, I think there was a brief stint where my dad really wanted all of us to play piano. I think that was something that all of his friends' kids were doing music, so he figured that was something good for kids to do, which I completely agree with. But as a 4-year-old, or a 5-year-old, however old I was, I didn't have the patience to sit and just pluck out notes on a piano. So I never really stuck with it. But other than that, arts was not something it wasn't put down, but it wasn't encouraged. It wasn't like an after-school thing that we really did. I did a musical in school in the 8th grade, and that was more because me and my older sister, who were very, very good friends, but back in the day we had that the quintessential sibling rivalry, and it was very much like anything you can do, I can do better. So she was in her grade 8 musical, so I was like, great, I'm going to do my grade 8 musical. But there was no interest in it whatsoever, really. And then I always liked to sing, but I never took lessons, never did it professionally. I always just kind of could sing. I was also a really late bloomer in every sense of the word. So my voice also just naturally was riding a little higher than most of the guys. And then at the end of high school, I started singing a little bit. And again, it was something I liked to do, but it wasn't anything I thought of career-wise. It actually wasn't until halfway through my undergrad that I found the theater department. When I was leaving high school and graduating, I had less than zero idea what I wanted to do. I didn't even have I have a lot of friends who went into a program that they thought they wanted to do, and it turns out they didn't want to, but they at least had some sort of direction to at least start that journey on. I didn't even have that. And so I really used my time at university after doing a first year of just maths and sciences, which I found very interesting, but I was not good at, and I was miserable spending that amount of time doing something I wasn't passionate about. I remember thinking that I didn't really care what I did as long as I was passionate. It drove me. And so once I found the combination of this kind of work I'm passionate about for whatever reason, these kinds of people I'm passionate about and feel inspired by for whatever reason, that's when I sort of doubled down on everything. And I really committed to getting in a crazy psychotic kind of way, overly involved in as many productions as possible. And, I took voice lessons for the first time. I actually this is back in 2011, 2012, whatever it was. And I went to like the one main like dance studio in Kingston. And I just walked in my, baggy jeans. And I remember the guy behind the table looking at me like I just, I walked in from another dimension. And I just said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm looking for dance lessons. And I think part of it is because I was a guy, and like a guy walking into a dance studio, especially looking like me at the time, it garnered some interest from the dude behind the counter. And he was great. He was really supportive. And that's kind of how I made my way into the arts. Yeah.
I think something so interesting that you said that, it's funny. I've never really, as far as I can recall, touched on this. And it's the idea of, like, yeah, there's things that you, the person, are passionate about the field that you're going into, entertainment industry, whatever. But I think equally, and if not maybe more important, the people within that field.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy because I in high school, I loved math. And I wasn't the best person in my school at math, but math was my best subject. So I was like in the advanced math like circuit, but in that advanced math circuit, I was at the bottom. So it was a weird place to be. And so there was this weird, like, I didn't feel fulfilled by the people that I was, like, I thought they were very nice people, and some of them were still some of my closest friends to this day, but I didn't feel fulfilled by the work that we were doing, and I didn't feel inspired by other people getting stuff, quote unquote, right, and figuring stuff out, and it felt very isolating. And, the work that you have to do only gets more intense in that direction from there. It's a lot of hours in one single room. It's a lot of hyper fixating on one specific thing that could take God knows how long. And there's brilliance behind that, and it's just not a brilliance that I have. But I remember when I realized that in order to do theater or in order to do art in a performative way, there are exceptions to this, but it requires other people. And it requires other people not just doing what you're doing, but looking at what you're doing from another lens and collaborating and adding to it. And it's like, we're all pieces of this bigger thing that you hope just resonates with someone somewhere. And when I met the people who kind of came from that place, I went, oh, these are the kinds of people, these are the kinds of minds, these are the kinds of conversations that, for whatever reason, I didn't really know it at the time, for whatever reason, they added a certain hop to my step. They added a certain an extra desire to want to be in that room where it happens. And so, yes, the work was great. And yes, the field of study was really interesting to me. But once I met the people and I was like, oh, there's a frequency here that growing up I wasn't a part of, in high school I wasn't exposed to. That's kind of the thing that did it in for me, where I was like, this is the thing. I don't know what. It could be set design, it could be acting, it could be directing, it could be anything. But this world is the one that I want to live in and move forward with.
And it's interesting because, and I'd love your thoughts on this, when you were mentioning how when you were in high school moving into university, you had like no quote unquote direction.
Zero.
As wooey as it sounds, like, was it because your direction inevitably needed to be theater, acting, like entertainment industry? Or what was it about that transition from high school to university? So many people I talked to were like, I am committed to doing this rational career choice. Like, right. This is a horrible question, but why didn't you have any direction, Daniel?
Yeah, I think so.
But
fair
where did
enough.
that come from?
I think part of it was, and I looking back, it came from a profound insecurity on my end. Like, also in high school, I wasn't like amazing at anything. I really wasn't. I think if I had an affinity, I was a really small, underdeveloped late bloomer kid who wasn't dumb, but I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I tried really hard at school, but I never did great at it. So like I was kind of all like, I was mediocre to good at a lot of things, but I excelled at nothing. And so when you have that, it's tough to pick something unless there's something that really draws your heart and soul. And so there was that. There definitely was pressure from, I don't know, call it my friends and, the student body and the teachers. My parents didn't really care what I did well, that's not true. They cared what I did, but like, good for them. It was more, they didn't really care specifically as long as I was able to support myself, which was an interesting transition to telling them that I was going to be an artist, 3 years later. Yeah, that was an interesting moment. But I think it was because I didn't have a specific obvious character trait or academic affinity that was obvious to me. And I think, like, when I applied to universities, I applied to 5 different schools in 5 different towns using 5 different projects. Subjects. So it's not like I applied to 5 schools and I applied to math at all of them. I applied to, I got into computer science at Queen's. I applied to kinesiology because I thought that was cool. That was one of my favorite courses in high school. I applied to that at Dalhousie. I applied to math at Waterloo. I applied to psychology. It's just like, it was a wide array. So I think my application showed just how non-directed I was. And I think it was out of fear, truthfully, because there was so much pressure on, and I now know better, having been through it and having seen what other people do. There was this pressure of the choice you make now is the choice that you are going to have to double down on for the rest of your life. The choices you make now will determine, not impact, determine your future. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So I think it was a combination of my own underdevelopment and insecurities, plus like a fear of, not wanting to commit to the wrong thing, which was really hard in the moment, but I think kind of saved me. Because if I had said, okay, I'm going to make the choice now, I know I'm going to decide to choose to know that I'm going to be a mathematician for the rest of my life, it would have been harder to explore and pull away from that and try other things. So I'm kind of grateful for that now. It sucked at the moment, though.
Absolutely. And I think, a whole bunch of things are running through my head. The first one is the idea that a lot of our career paths that we feel we have to pick are like all the ones that you listed, right? Mm-hmm. And they are very solitary. Like, your success can be, not have to be, but can be solitary. And so I wonder if someone like yourself, who it's like you were good, not great at a lot of things, it's because it was you as the individual. But as soon as you found the community, then it's you plus a community means you excel and you're great at it.
I think that was part of it, because I do think that like the community you're a part of can either build you up or tear you down. I think it's why a lot of people either love their hometown or hate their hometown. I think it's why a lot of people love their job or hate their job. It's whether or not they feel supported by their coworkers and their employees or employers. If they feel the clients that they're working with and for respect them and value the work that they do. No one likes feeling replaceable. No one likes feeling like a number. And so I think that was a huge part of it. And like to add on top of that, like I didn't know this at the time. I've done a lot of work with myself. Are we allowed to like swear on this, by the way? I don't know.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Great. I was an emotional ass kid. Like I was. And I did come up in a household where I was allowed to really express it. It wasn't shame for expressing it, but I wasn't given tools to express it. I only learned how to express my deep anger or my deep sadness or my deep loneliness or my deep insert emotions here, I would say in my early mid-20s when I discovered the arts. The person I was in my third year of university could not be more different than the person I was in my second year of university, just 12 months prior, just because of the work I had done and what I had learned about myself and those around me. learning where my anger was coming from, learning where my sadness was coming from, and all that stuff. But the community made a world of difference. And I didn't know that was something that was important to me until I found it. Like, I know people that don't want that in their professional life. They want that in their personal life, not their professional life. They want to show up, do their work, go the hell home, and like clock out, which is fair. But I don't know. I need things in my life, whether it's a profession or a relationship or a hobby, whatever it is. I need it. I know I'm going to give a certain amount of myself to it. And in order for me to find the ability to do that, I need it to be also refueling my tank in return. So I need my job to fulfill me passionately and make me passionate about it, so that when I come home to my partner or my family or my friends, I'm bringing that passion and that fire to it. And vice versa. I need my relationships to fulfill me, so that when I show up to work, I'm not just this, I haven't expended everything, because it requires a certain amount of me. But the community, I think,
so
is
interesting
huge.
Because, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I think it's so interesting because there is such a serious thought of box yourself at work and then allow yourself freedom at home. And I think it can be good and bad, right? Because I agree with it in some ways, right? Like, work gives me money, so I make money, so I have it, so I can do my hobby that is art.
Correct.
But it's a lot of pressure to say that work is now my art and gives me money, and there's pressure put on that now.
Maybe. I think it is about balance. And when I say balance, I don't mean 50-50. I feel like the word balance to a lot of people means like it's equal parts one and the other. I don't think that's true. You know, if you took like a scale and you put, a single loonie or a single penny on one side of the scale, and then you put a feather on the other one, they're numerically equal parts. It's 1 and 1, but they're not balanced. You need a bunch more feathers to equal that 1 penny or whatever. And so I don't think balance means equal, but I think it's about where you're finding other things. I feel very fortunate because my income, or a good part of my income, comes from my teaching. It comes from my classes and my coachings and my audition prep and stuff. So I'm lucky that my supplementary income is still involved in the art form that I'm practicing and working towards. But I also think you get that pressure put on you when you start thinking about what the word success means and what the word financial stability means. A lot of people in this world think that success means, oh, everyone on the street knows you because they recognize you from that amazing role in that TV show and you were nominated for an Emmy. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think that's a version of like numerical success, but like, I don't think you need to have won awards in order to be successful. I know lots of people who they're some of my favorite actors in the city and no one knows who they are, but they're consistently working. I would say that's a level of success that most people don't have, myself included right now. So I think because I'm looking at it from the craft and I'm finding balance in other parts of my life, I don't think I necessarily feel that pressure in this moment. Granted, there are definitely fleeting moments of pressure where I feel like I need to be doing better and I haven't, quite hit the mark or whatever it is. But I think it's all a mindset game for sure. As I learn when I'm one of the classes I teach, and that was a plug on this. Can I plug myself? Great. So one of the classes I teach at LB Acting Studio, it's one of my favorites to teach. It's actually the first class I taught, and I've been teaching it every round, and it's sold out every round since I started teaching it. Is the Acting for Beginners, and I love it because I mainly get people who aren't actors coming in there and being like, "What is this crazy world called acting?" And it's crazy because so many of them, I would say at more than 50%. I don't know the number, but it's definitely more than 50% of the people that come in there come from other industries because they went into that because that's the degree they got because they were pressured by their community and their family and their friends to do that. And they're realizing post-pandemic that they are so unhappy and they just want to try something. And so I see that as success. Like that's beautiful to give. And I think that gets to the core. Sorry, I know I'm rambling here, but I know that
No.
that gets to the core of, for me, what we do and why we do it. I don't think this is supposed to, I don't think acting and storytelling is supposed to tell people what to think, but I think it's supposed to share and tell people what to think about. And I think if exploring it can give someone else permission to be more honest, or with themselves or with others, or it gives them permission to feel the totality that is their insecurity a little more deeper so they can understand it better. Or on the flip side, to experience their joy a little deeper. I know a lot of people when they're experiencing moments of pure joy, they tend to hold it back because it feels like bragging sometimes, or they're in the middle of public. And I'm like, who cares? Express your pure joy, express your pure sadness. And so if it gives people permission unconsciously to do that, then I think that's a level of success for sure. It has the same desired impact.
Yeah, and as someone who has took that acting for beginners class in the thick of the pandemic, and that's the nexus of this whole dang podcast, right?
Yeah.
It is so powerful to be in a place, an acting class or whatever, where you have the freedom to express your emotions, but it's also, I don't want to say the word applauded or lauded or anything like that, but it's supported and encouraged.
Yeah.
And I think it's, as a beginner, a place that overwhelmed me because I wasn't expecting that from an acting class.
I would say it's overwhelming for most people because and I make this very clear at the beginning of the class, especially after we get the first one or two people up on the mark doing the exercises, and the looks on their faces are like, what did I just enter into? They look kind of like their world has been rocked. This is not therapy. I am not a therapist. We are not a therapy studio. That's not what we're licensed to do. I think therapy is very important, and there are people way smarter and more qualified than me that you should look into for that. However, I'll be damned if there isn't something therapeutic about it. So much of therapy is about taking time to sit with our feelings and to talk things out and to kind of dig deeper and see where it's coming from and come to realizations about ourselves, which makes us learn things about ourselves. And that's so much of therapy. And so a lot of people come there and they do feel that. And I think, no one likes feeling unheard or unseen or misunderstood. And a lot of people, when they go into their careers, that overtakes their entire life, and they're not able to spend as much time with their family and friends and loved ones. And they're constantly just trying to, fair enough, to get the approval of their employer to say that they're doing a good job to get that raise, but they can't remember their name, and they don't get that raise, and they don't get that, accreditation. No one really, no one likes that, and that doesn't make anyone feel good. It's why people race home and will take Sunday night off because Game of Thrones is on, or because Love is Blind is on, or because whatever thing is on, because it makes them feel seen and entertained and understood. They don't have to appease anyone. They can just sit in the enjoyment of that. It's not about them trying to be something other than themselves in that moment.
That's so powerful. Tell me about your journey from acting. I know you are still an actor, but
Yes.
What was the decision? What was the change, or what happened that said, I think I'd like to teach as well?
So it's actually interesting because I remember before I even became an actor, it's kind of a two-part. I always had an affinity towards it without even knowing it, just because I was good at helping people, like in high school and university, study for tests. I had there was an interesting kind of patience I had with articulating myself in a way to help someone else understand it, and having the patience to let them sit in the processing of what it is that they just learned. So there was that. But I don't think I was like, oh yeah, like I think I was part when I was in my first year of university. The computer science program I was in was part of the education program. I didn't join that because I wanted to be a teacher. I joined that because at the time it was the easiest program to get into at the university I wanted to get into. So that was that. But I never had like this deep desire to be a teacher. Especially because I didn't know what I wanted to teach. That to me was like, if I teach in the future, it'll be because I figured out what I like and what I love and what I'm passionate about. And I hadn't figured that out yet. But teaching at LB Acting Studio wasn't really my choice. I didn't set out to do it. I never made it known that it's something I wanted to do, like to Lewis. What happened? Well, I've been training at LB for quite some time, including during the pandemic. I was taking class throughout the entirety of the pandemic virtually, which I thought was great because a lot of people waited for the pandemic to sort of open up, but then they didn't know how to handle the Zoom format. So I was helping a lot of people make that transition because I had just spent a year and a half doing that, taking classes and helping people over Zoom. So there was that, and there were a lot of people that were kind of like, can you help me with this audition? Or I want to do this read through with you. Can you help me with this this script breakdown? And so I was just helping people like in my own time. It was a pandemic. What else were we gonna fucking do? So it got to that point where I wasn't taking business away from the studio. Let's be clear about that. But I think Lewis saw when I was taking classes there at the studio with him, as well as with Stephen Yaffe, that I was I had already been kind of involved in the community. I was helping the studio out, like doing certain administrative things for them, and it would, they cut me a deal in classes, a little energy exchange. So they kind of knew me already, and I was having in-depth conversations with Lewis about like the ethos that he teaches and where he comes from, not to be a teacher, just for my greater understanding. Because the pandemic, as awful as it was sort of a gift, so I could not have to worry about income. I could just focus on the crap. Like that's all I did. We all dealt with the pandemic in our own different ways. I became a sociopath during the pandemic and just hyperfixated on the one thing. We all have our thing. I went crazy. And I put my craziness into the ground. I am what I am. And so through those conversations with Lewis and with helping other people and in being involved in those one-on-one and group and coach discussions, I showed up to, I can't remember if it was the first or the second round of classes when the studio opened back up to in-person. But Lewis just pulled me aside and he just said he wanted to start training me to teach. Now, it kind of worked out also because part of the energy exchange I did was for like a solid 6 or 7 months. I was Lewis's TA, where I would come in and sit with him during his new to LB or intro to the studio classes, which teach these foundational ideas. Every studio has some sort of, new to the studio or new to working this way class that a lot of people have to take. Which I think is great because it gives you an opportunity to at least test the waters if this is something you want to commit to. So I had sat in on that class 7 or 8 times. I could give you the same stories and lectures he gave those students off by heart. And so I already, without trying to be a teacher, I had already started to consume and learn the way that he wanted his teachers to teach, and where he wanted them to operate from artistically. And so it the stars just kind of aligned in that case. And I was really hesitant at first. I'm a lot more confident now, obviously, if I'm in the middle of my 3rd year of teaching and I've got more credits under my belt. But at the time I was non-union. I didn't have a lot of credits. I was like, who the hell am I to tell anyone or help anyone on how to do this? I'm still figuring it out myself. And what I appreciate is that Lewis saw that imposter syndrome and realized that there was a value to it, specifically with the new to the studio, to the beginners class, because all those people were coming from that as well. And as I've gained experience in both my time as an actor and as a coach, it's given me more insight into what it's like to be on that mark as a new person. But I still have that imposter syndrome sometimes. But yeah, I never put it out there to Lewis that I wanted to be a coach or that I wanted to be a teacher or anything. but he saw that it was kind of already starting to happen, whether I wanted it to or not. So he's like, great, let's just make this official and you will come here. Yeah.
You'll make it so.
Lewis made it so, and then it was. So it was written, so it shall be. Yeah. And a refill.
Yeah, like, it's just fabulous. I love it. Has there been anything that has really surprised you about the entertainment industry as a whole, as an actor, as a coach? Anything surprising?
Well, that's a broad question.
Yeah.
So as a coach, yes. It's really gotten me. I didn't realize, and maybe this seems obvious, so I'm sorry if anyone listening to this is like, how could you not think of that? That's obvious. But when I was becoming a coach, because I was looking at it from the perspective of how can I help them, or how can I be of assistance and of service to them, I didn't really think about how it would get me to think about my own craft, and how it would affect me as an actor, which now I'm like, duh, of course it's going to. So that was really interesting. And I don't think I realized how much, how emotionally and mentally draining and taxing it was. And this isn't to poo-poo on actors, but if you've taken my class recently, you know I'm on this tirade of the word preparation. And I think a lot of people don't know what the word preparation means. And I think what needs to come prepared and ready to go, people have different definitions, but a lot of people haven't thought about it. A lot of people come in, they're like, oh yeah, I'm ready, I memorized my lines. And I'm like, is that all you did? All you did was, the only thing you want to do in this craft is memorize lines? That's the reason that you accepted this audition? That's the reason you wanted an agent, so they can get you more jobs so that you can memorize more lines? There are other industries where memorization is way more useful and you get paid way more consistently. So, I a lot of the time when people come in and all they've done is the bare minimum of memorizing their lines, it's a lot of me stringing them along and getting them to ask questions and getting them to dig a little deeper. And I didn't realize going into it what it would literally feel physically taxing on me. Yeah, I also think as an artist, because I come from like a theater and musical theater background where they teach a lot of rules and not tools. And I think in my time as an actor, in conjunction with my time as a coach, I've realized, yes, you need a core understanding of these rules, but it's so that they can become tools so that you can try different things, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. Not every role, not every project, not every audition, not every script requires the same approach or the same part of yourself.
Right.
My favorite analogy with that is you can't paint a wall with a hammer. You may love your hammer, it may be the tool you lean on the most, but if you gotta paint a wall with it, it's not the tool you're gonna use. It's not even the 10th tool you're gonna use. And so realizing this notion of tools and not rules, I think was surprising, because my entire life up until then, it was about, here are the rules, here's how you do it, here's how you don't do it, don't be stupid, do it the way you're supposed to do it, as opposed to something that's a little more nuanced and fluid.
Do you have any advice then for people new to acting, besides take your class? Duh.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people, especially those who are coming to this career, curious about this career after they've basically lived a life, right? They've had another job, they're looking to change.
Yeah. Okay. The first thing I usually say to them is to don't assume that the life you've lived that you're looking to change from doesn't have value to it. A lot of times people come in and think they need to be different, or, they shame themselves in the way they talk about it when they say, here's what my job is, or I'm currently unemployed, or I just graduated and I have no idea what I want to do. I just got this degree and I don't want to do that. There's a lot of human truth to that. What that lostness feels like, what that anger feels like, what that shame and solitude feels like. not because they're nice things to feel, but these are the things that our characters go through in their heightened moments. And realize that, yes, acting is a craft and it's a business and an art form and a career and all that stuff. But it really is, when you boil it down, it's a new way of looking at people, and it's a new way of looking at the world around you. And if you can't even empathize with yourself, how are you going to be able to empathize with a character you're trying to do justice on command? And so taking more time, like, yes, class is important, but if you're waiting until, if you decide that this is what you want to do, I think a lot of people don't know what it takes to do this craft and what it takes to be part of this industry. So they come in saying, I want to do this, and they haven't learned what that actually, like, internally, egotistically entails in order to make that decision. But if they are making that decision to do it, you got to understand that, like, if you're waiting for a script, or you're waiting for an audition or a booking or a rehearsal or whatever it is to practice empathy and breathing and curiosity, it's not enough. You need to be doing it in your day-to-day. And it doesn't mean that you have to constantly be taking class every day, but it does mean you have to look at the world and the people around you through a different lens. Have more patience with that person. Someone's getting angry with you for something that you didn't do. Yeah, the gut reaction is to yell back at them. Before you do that, breathe and take a moment and empathize with the fact that they feel lonely. They're feeling scared. They're feeling angry. They feel unseen. And a lot of times it'll change your reaction to them. It'll diffuse the situation a lot. Take more time, instead of shutting yourself down because you don't want to cry in front of that person, or you don't want to disrespect that person. Fair enough. Like, don't ruin your relationships. Don't go out in the street and be dangerous or anything, but give yourself permission, at least in your private moments, to sit in those uncomfortable things a little longer. Because if we can't even give ourselves permission to sit in it when there's no job on the line, there's no pressure to perform, there's no desire to achieve anything, then how are we going to expect to show up on the mark in front of strangers, in front of a crew, and do it on command? And so, yes, script analysis is important. Understanding character and tone and genre and auditioning and all that stuff is really important, but it's got to start from connecting to the humanity of it. And if you're waiting until you have a script in your hands to practice empathy towards a particular human experience, it doesn't matter how well you memorized your lines, because it's not rooted in the thing that person's going through. It's important for people to understand that it's just as important. It's important to train. It's important to take classes, whether it's various techniques or improv or skills or whatever it is. Learn that dialect, learn that accent, learn stage combat. It's all of that is to help shape and mold the storytelling of a particular human life experience. And so, yes, those are important things, but those are supposed to sit on top of a core understanding of the human life experience. And so if you're starting later, you have an entire well of life experiences to draw from. And I find that, there are a lot of transitions. Lou talks about this sometimes, where, there's a transition of being a kid actor to being a teen actor. And there's a transition from being a teen actor to a young adult, and then a young adult to an adult and stuff like that. And sometimes it's tough because, especially when you're a kid, but even so when you're, a teen and a young adult, you haven't experienced certain things. And it doesn't just mean the experience. Let's say you're 10 years old and you haven't experienced a death in the family. Well, it's not just about experiencing a death in the family. It's understanding what grief is, what the various forms of grief look like, what happens when people get into that really odd thing that's called competitive grieving, when the family gets together, who has the right to, if you're a kid, if you're a teen and you haven't dealt with that, that's something you can maybe start to think about, but you don't really understand what that's like. You've never been a part of that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to, in order to act, you have to have lived that specific experience. But having lived a wide variety of specific experiences gives you more opportunity to empathize and ask certain questions and have a deeper understanding to bring to the human that you are trying to take on, rather than it being this thing that holds you back because you're an actor. An actor is just about exploring humanity. So, yeah, no, I think that when you live your life, well, that's why a lot of actors will take some time training, and then they'll take just as much time to fuck off. And they'll go travel, and they will get their heart broken, and they will fall in love again, and then they will try a new endeavor, and then they will epically fail at that endeavor, and then they will try another, you know what I mean? Like, it's constantly trying things. And so, no, your life does not go up in a puff of smoke. Your life is a lovely basket of knowledge and life understanding. And so if you're starting at whatever age, whether it's 20 or 70, you've got that much more life experience going for you, and that's a blessing.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Do you have any favorite moments, either on set yourself as an actor or in class as a coach, teacher, or both?
Ooh. As a teacher and a coach, I'm there to be of service for people. I'm there to create a safe, non-judgmental space for people to feel uncomfortable, for people to push. We have an idea of who we are. We have these, I am this person, I am a son, I am a guy, I am a boyfriend, I'm so on, whatever. And we have ideas in our head of what we look, sound, and feel like with those labels. And we're really so much more of that. Those are just the versions of ourselves we give ourselves permission to express. And so when you come into a class or when you come into a coaching, it's an opportunity for you to see if you can break through that barrier and realize there's so much more on the other side of that. I don't think it's a matter of if anyone has the ability to. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to let yourself do it. And it's tough. And so the moments where I see someone kind of throwing caution to the wind, not because they're shooting in the dark and they don't know where they're going. They're committing to the breathing. They're committing to a way of thinking. They're committing to whatever decision they've made in the scene, and it leads them to a place that feels unfamiliar to them, which by nature will make them feel uneasy. But they have worked enough on their craft to give themselves permission to feel uneasy in that moment. Where they discover something new about themselves and the character in that moment, a deeper part of that well. So that for me is all, and I'm thinking of like a couple moments right now. I had one in the last round. I'm not going to name names, obviously, but I had a guy who took beginners with me, and then he took the next step, which is the class you take after beginners, and then he was in my on-camera class, and he started acting at, I think he's like 40, and he he used to be an animator, and so he's looking at the world through a different lens, and he's always trying to get it right, and he really committed to it, whatever commitment means to you. And it looked the whole time when he was doing the scene, it was a tough scene and it was an emotional scene, but you could tell that he, not the character, he was scared. And then you could also tell that he, not character, was mustering up the courage to let himself feel scared. And what was so interesting is that is exactly what the character was going through. And so that mysterious magical line between actor and character started to disappear. And that's what made it feel human and not robotic. I think as an actor, some of my favorite moments, obviously, you have your career moments where you have that booking that you're like, I can't believe I get the opportunity to do this, or I can't believe I got a call back for that, or I booked an agent, or I booked a battery, or whatever. All that stuff is there. Some of my favorite moments have been undocumented. They're in class. But it was, I think, this past year, when was it? It was in November it was in the summer. It was in the summer of 23. I did my first lead in a feature film. And I was super, it was it was an ensemble cast in the sense of there wasn't one lead. But there were 5 or 6 leads, and all these people had more experience than me. So I'm okay, well, the story kind of follows my character. So, oh God, I hope the training helps. I hope I'm not shitty or anything like that. And I showed up, and everyone brought their own sauce to the table, and it was realizing that, okay, this is one of those rare moments where I could see that my training is helping me. It doesn't feel as blind faith-esque anymore, you know? So that was a really exciting moment for me.
Is there anything that you are looking forward to coming up this year?
Coming up this year, yeah. I think I've got a couple projects coming out, so I'm really excited for those. I've been doing a lot of writing as well. I think that's really important. And I'm excited because I feel there's been like a shift in like my outlook as a teacher and a coach. I feel like at the beginning of my time there, there was I felt a lot of pressure on myself to fix everyone and to make everyone good. And that's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to make everyone a good actor. I'm there to facilitate that growing, learning process. I obviously want to be one of the pillars of support on the highway that is that actor's journey, and I want them to be able to look back and say, hey, thank you for that. I wouldn't have been able to get here if it had not been for that. But I'm excited to go into this year of teaching with kind of that new mindset, because I feel like one thing that I'm always cautious of, and this is true from before I became a teacher, this is true of, before I trained at a studio that I trained and worked at. I've taken a lot of classes at a lot of different studios in different countries. And sometimes there's a sense of ego around the teacher where it's not about growing, it's about getting the approval from the teacher. And so I don't think I ever quite did that, but I think there were moments early on where, because I was putting pressure on me to fix people and to be better, I flirted with that egotistical line, and so I'm excited to not ease up not say I don't have as much responsibility. I think if anything that puts more responsibility on me, but to sit a little more comfortably in that very delicate balance of what the actor needs from me and expects from me versus how much I go, no, this isn't for me to dictate or to validate. This is just for me to be the thing you can look back to, so I can be behind you going, you're doing great, So I'm really excited for that.
Well, and it's funny because I think that is exactly what it must be like to feel as an actor, at least for me. That would make me, if I was on set like you were, the lead in this, being like, oh God, I sure hope the training kicks in. Yeah. It needs to kick in a way like that you just described. Yeah.
It's weird, man, because it's not always consistent. It's not always there. I think we strive towards consistency, but like human beings are not consistent. And so this notion that we have to be consistent in that way does not align with what it is that we're doing. Now, we want certain things to be consistent. We always want to show up ready to go. We always want to put forward good work. We want to continue to instill confidence in casting or directors or the filmmakers we're working with, that when you work with me, it's going to be a wonderful experience, or I'm going to show up ready to go and can collaborate and won't make it just like, yes, all of that stuff is true, but you can't do that to the point where you feel like you're an artistic gridlock. You have to allow for new things to occur. Otherwise, when you do 4 takes of that scene from that angle, you've given the director no options to work within the editing room. You've given no life in the moment. There's nothing new for the other person to react to. So it just intrinsically feels routine. And so we have to allow ourselves to feel a little shaky and a little uncertain. It's a tough one, and sometimes it falls flat on its face. But I draw a lot of sports analogies in my classes, particularly basketball. We're a big NBA Raptors family in this household, and like the best shooters in the world, Steph Curry isn't shooting 100%. He's not. The best batters in baseball are shooting 400 what the term is, 400, 40%. Yeah.
I have no idea.
They're batting 40%. They're not even cracking 50%. And so if you look at any other craft in any other industry that requires practice and dedication and lifelong growth mindset, we're okay with people performing at a sub 50% level, and we celebrate that. That's the thing that wins championships. Yet for some reason, when we're not 100% all the time, we hate ourselves, and we need to be kinder with that. Yeah.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
Oh, God. This
has been filled with it.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes I feel like I just ramble, and I just hope to the powers that be that someone finds value to some of it.
Oof. Yeah.
I know that this is, second act actors, and it's, a lot of people listening to this are people who are finding it later in life. I really firmly believe that it's never too late to start. I really think it goes back to it will require a good hard look in the mirror that not a lot of people are ready for. I've had students who are 70 plus years old. I have one who's working through some of his stuff now, and he literally said, we had like 6 coachings in a row, and he literally said at the end of the 6th one, he goes, "This is tough, especially for someone like me who hasn't given himself permission to express anything for 70 plus years." Yeah, that's a tough one. And I'm like, okay, well, there's some work there I can help with, some of which I'm not qualified to help with. I don't think it's too late. I also feel like I'm behind the 8 ball because I didn't find this until my early mid-20s, whereas most of my friends have done this since they were kids or teenagers or whatever. But I think something that was really important to me, especially when I went away to school in the States, and that was the first time I really committed to the training of this. And I was in class with people who had already been singing and dancing for 15, 20 years. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. That's not fair. If you're starting at 30 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old, I understand the stress and anxiety around, well, I only have, quote unquote, so much time left, so I must do more in less amount of time. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. But you also have to be fair to yourself about that in terms of how much time it takes. I myself, I'm in my early 30s now. And I remember at the end of my 20s feeling really stressed out that I was going to, not be able to play some of these like 20-year-old roles anymore. And I can still go in for 20s, especially when I'm not, I don't have the caveman beard right now. I've got a young energy to me. I'm young, I'm spry. But I'm not going to be cast as a 20 or 21-year-old when I'm standing next to an actual 20 or 21-year-old. I'm simply not. But what's really cool is that at the end of your 20s, that's when your 30s start. And now you're in a whole new category. There's a whole decade of options there. And as you start to feel that stress at the end of your 30s, you know what's on the other side of that? Your 40s. And on the other side of that is your 50s. And on the other side of that is your 60s, and so on. And so there's always going to be roles for these different age groups. It's not like an athlete where after, unless you're the LeBron Jameses of the world where you're playing at an elite level, pushing 40, it's not like once you hit 33, 34, you're past your prime. I don't know if there exists a prime in an actor's, journey if they're committing to it. So if you're starting at 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever the age is, it will require that same level of commitment, but it's definitely not too late. If anything, there are less people in your category the older you get, so your odds shoot through the freaking roof. And I think it's important to know that some of the insecurity never goes away, some of the imposter syndrome never goes away, but it's never too late to start.
I love it. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Daniel, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with me and with my listeners. If you are all interested in taking a class with Daniel, get on it. His classes always sell out. He coaches at LB Acting Studio here in Toronto. He also does one-on-one coaching. Also, as you all know, I am not paid by LB Acting Studio to promote this or promote Daniel. He has rave reviews. I have heard rave reviews. Again, I'm not paid. I just hear things, and chatter around the acting community is so positive for this guy. Highly recommend it. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!